We continue with installations of many packages we need to run everything. Our server is headless. That means it has no monitor or video display. So if we try to use an API like Swing or JavaFX, the app will fail as it won't be able to display anything. Normally that is not a problem, but since we might want to run the CSS compiler, it would need access to graphics. It's also useful for other features. So if you want to generate images on the server, the ability to use Java 2D would be useful. That's where XVFB comes in handy. X11 is the windowing system for Linux and other Unix flavors. XVFB uses X on frame buffer and effectively allows us to draw even without a display. That's useful if we need to run GUI code that doesn't actually need the screen. We will next install Unzip. We'll need it later to install Ant. The next step is the installation of MariaDB, which I mentioned earlier. It's a fork of MySQL that is supported by CentOS. This installs the server itself, but we need a few additional steps. This adds MariaDB to the startup script, so it loads on system boot. This step verifies that the previous step succeeded and MariaDB is running. I would go into more details on this, but boot process in Linux is a bit different between distributions, so I'd rather not dig in too much. MySQL and MariaDB ship with a great script to harden security. I followed the advice and restricted as much as possible, although you might want to allow your IP to have remote access to the server. This might make it easier to administer the server remotely. This is an important step. Having a server discoverable on the internet is pretty dangerous. One thing I did, which is important, was setting the database password to the same value as the one I have in the development server. That means the code is exactly the same, albeit slightly less secure. To be fair, that's not a problem if the database can't be accessed remotely. The next step is exposing the right port. Unix-based systems block TCP ports below 1024. You can't listen on that port without root privileges. This is generally a security measure, so a random user who logs into the system won't start a server on the machine. There are many ways around it, but the one I use most often is IP tables, which you need to run as root and effectively redirect traffic in the kernel level. So traffic on port 80 gets redirected to 8080 in this command. In case you don't know, port 80 is the default port of the HTTP protocol. Port 443 isn't as known as port 80. It's the default port for HTTPS protocol. So we are doing here the exact same thing for that and port 8443. Finally, it's time to become the builder. Notice we don't need a password to do this, as we are assuming the builder user from the root user. Tilde is a special character in Unix. It represents the home directory of the user. So when we are root, tilde is /root. And when we are builder, it's /home/builder. Currently, we are at /root because that's where we logged in. So we need to go to the home directory of builder. And that's what this command does. Notice the sign next to the command is a $sign and not a pound sign or hash sign. That's because we are now using the user account and not the root account.